Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. The Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for Christmas Eve 2023. Merry Christmas to one and all. Now, before I get on to where I normally start, it is worth mentioning that I have a live stream planned for this afternoon, a kind of last throw of the dice before Christmas Day tomorrow. I'm going to be speaking to Jonathan Fink again from Silicon Curtain, and that is planned for about 2 o'clock UK time, 5 hours probably for Eastern EST in the US, and if you're in Australia, probably sometime in about 2 days. Anyway, please check that out. That should hopefully be a wide-ranging chat. He's such an excellent interlocutor. He's interviewed so many incredible people. I can't wait to get inside Jonathan's head again to see what he has found out, really, I guess, since we last spoke. So check that out sometime later today. Let's get to where we normally start. Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course. You can find them in the description to this video below. 800 personnel lost is high. It's obviously several hundred lower than where we've seen it over the last week or so. There's been incredibly high losses in personnel for the last 5 or 6 days, over 1,000. Tanks 4, certainly less than we have seen. Armour personnel vehicles 17 and artillery systems 28. So some pretty high figures for those two categories. Tanks right down. But yeah, still to lose 4 tanks in the day is nothing to be ashamed of for the Ukrainians. The Russians are still losing huge amounts of equipment, as according to the Ukrainian General Staff, on a consistent basis. 27 vehicles and fuel tanks is another heavy loss in that category, and 6 pieces of special equipment. So the Russians still appearing to be losing an awful lot of stuff on a daily basis, even though that is down from where we have seen it recently. Now, I didn't have this analysis from Andrew Perpetua out in yesterday's piece, news video, so I shared it with you on the Frontline update. Well, we've got 2 now. We've got that one and the one that came up subsequently. And the first thing to note is that for both of these, the figures are very much in favor of Ukraine. I mean, there we've got, what, a 7-8 to 1 ratio, Russian to Ukrainian losses, something like that. Maybe more, I don't know. But yeah, losing a couple of what basically Leopard 2A5s there. This Stridsvagn 122, the Swedish version of Leopard 2, is a big loss. In fact, they've lost 3 in total in that area. That's around Terney, as far as I know. And a Krab, AHS Krab, that is a Polish self-propelled gun, and electronic warfare system as well. So that's fairly high value losses for the Ukrainians, but that's all. There's 4 pieces of kit, whereas the Russians there have lost something like, what is that, 8 tanks, a few pieces of artillery, and a whole host of BMP2s and 3s, infantry fighting vehicles and APCs and whatnot, so as well as civilian pieces of kit. So that's a pretty big set of losses for the Russians. That was yesterday, and then today it's more of the same. So Ukrainians lost a couple of infantry fighting vehicles, there's old BMPs there, a few vans, SUVs, pickup trucks, and a boat. Not particularly high value kit. And then when we go to look at the Russian losses, well, there's surveillance and surveillance equipment there, a multiple launch rocket system, a bunch of tanks of different varieties, infantry fighting vehicles, a Typhoon mine-resistant ambush protection vehicle, and then a lot of loaf vans and Bukanka vans and civilian vehicles, an awful lot of logistics vehicles, and that could be as a result of the activity around Krinky. As you can see, a lot of this looks to be from FPV drone and other drone footage. Now, it's worth mentioning that, in fact, I think I've got it here. So Magyar has brought out another montage of a huge amount of equipment being destroyed in the Krinky area. Although here Tendar's only picking out an excerpt of that. There is just, when you get those montage videos, suddenly you've got another 20 vehicles to add to lists like this. So Andrew Perpetua no doubt has seen that, and that's probably where most of the civilian vehicle, these civilian vehicles are coming from. But anyway, Tendar says of that. Magyar's Birds released another lengthy video showing the destruction of all kinds of vehicles. I found this part interesting. It shows Russians massing near Korsunka, east of Krinky. So that's further up the river to the kind of northeast from Krinky. 3 Russian BMPs got caught in the open, and when Russians realised that FPV drones were coming down, they hid in the bushes. At least 1 BMP got hit. This video shows, in particular, how early Russians are getting harassed, and why the small Ukrainian detachment in Krinky against all odds still holds the line. So the Ukrainians in Krinky are having a hard time of it, but my goodness, they are giving the Russians something to think about. And we'll come on to talk about that particular area in a second too, in the next segment. But just to let you know that these figures that the General Staff release on a daily basis, when you see 27 vehicles and fuel tanks, well, actually, that is something that you can pretty much fully justify from what we see in just Andrew Perpetua's analysis there. I'm fairly confident that the figures we see in the Ukrainian General Staff releases on a daily basis are pretty accurate. And I just think we have the evidence to support that claim. Right, moving on. War Translated here shows a video. Now, in all honesty, I'm not quite sure what's going on in this video. What I mean by that is I don't really know what the Russians are doing here. And this is actually, when you look at the conversation below this, is pretty much what most people are saying. Like, what are they doing? War Translated says Ukraine has the best or worst meet and greet service in the world, depending on the capacity that you're coming from there. But Sinkivka, Kupiansk front, repelling a mass vehicle and an infantry assault. Now, this isn't too dodgy. It's a sped up video, but like what I can say is check out the huge column of vehicles here. Now, in my opinion, this is a missed opportunity, probably because they have a lack of artillery ammunition here. The Ukrainians, they're obviously being spotted by a Ukrainian drone. There's a massive bunch of equipment just coming through. I mean, probably 20 pieces of kit there or thereabouts, maybe a dozen to 20, depending on, how far back that goes and the number here. Huge numbers of kit moving in columns. And then, it's inconceivable that you would want to do this, but these guys do kind of split up a little bit. That's a mine roller at the front, and then the other pieces of equipment kind of generally split up. That goes off in a different direction to some of these, all of these, and nothing really follows the mine roller. I presume it's then going back, but it then hits a mine there, but carries on. I mean, that's what it's designed to do. But these guys then look to be coming, and there is some artillery trying to hit them, but they come to this house, and essentially what happens, and I'll stop it here because, I'll get hit for what happens, but all of this equipment, I will just show you this, all of this equipment is parked up together, and you're thinking just a couple of well-positioned artillery shots will look absolutely hammered about 6 bits of kit as they park up here, drop a handful of people off, and then seem to turn around and go back. And you're like, you've got a column of 20 vehicles to drop off 10 people that then get hammered themselves by IEDs. And actually, I think there's some Ukrainian soldiers around here as well. And I don't know, it's just everything about this whole video just leaves me thinking, what are you doing? Is this sensible? Really, all of those vehicles should have been destroyed. That's my first thought, is the Ukrainians did miss a trick there. I mean, it's such a shame. They obviously knew they're there. They're filming them, but they don't get to destroy them. It's a perfect opportunity to take out a dozen bits of kit all in one. But nonetheless, this is a sort of activity that when you then look at the General Staff figures and you go, how have you lost? I know it didn't happen today, but there's still 17 APVs today or yesterday. The day before there were double figures for all of these categories. You're thinking, how are you losing that much stuff in a day. And then you're thinking, well, there's one single attack that uses all sorts of equipment that is not very cleverly executed and is incredibly risky for all those bits of equipment. If that's happening on a daily basis, then there's no wonder that the Russians are losing huge amounts of equipment. Anyway, I digress. Well, not really. It's on point. A shopping centre caught fire in Moscow. Heavy smoke is visible on the roof. Visitors are being evacuated. I've not shown you Russia on fire for some time, but there is another example of Russia on fire as we see another shopping mall in flames, or at least there's smoke, and wherever there's smoke, one assumes there's fire. Right. Distance strikes. Here we have another good day of interception for the Ukrainians. A total of 14 out of 15 Shaheeds were shot down. And what they achieved, I'm not sure. I don't know what the one that did hit, whether it hit a military target or whatever. I'm not too sure. No news really coming out. Again, it comes to wondering why they're sending Shaheeds and not missiles. Are they waiting for the F-16s to be settled down and then hit the F-16s? Or are they... are there other reasons that I've given previously? They're trying to exhaust possibly the Ukrainian air defense missiles, the expensive missiles, exhaust those on Shaheeds, and then let the cruise missiles and Kinzhals do their thing. I don't know what the reason is, but they are not sending waves of cruise missiles. Okay, moving on. Yesterday evening, Russian forces struck critical infrastructure in Kherson. As a result, there was a rupture in a gas network. Head of Kherson Oblast has said. Russian forces also hit one of the city's medical facilities. It's something that they do routinely, particularly in this area. They did it in the Syrian war. They have done it in this Russia-Ukraine war, where they've struck over 700 medical facilities. And you can be assured that this is systematic, that they are fully intentionally hitting medical facilities. We know that they did that in Syria when they were provided with the coordinates by people like the International Red Cross and Médecins Sans Frontières. I think provided the Russians with the coordinates of all the hospitals, 24 hospitals. They said, please do not hit these hospitals. Here are the coordinates so you don't hit them. And then straight away the Russians hit all 24 facilities, as far as I remember. They were given the coordinates, so like, thank you very much, we're now going to hit them. And they purposefully took out medical facilities. So we know they do that, the Russians, and they have done that in Ukraine. It's just more examples of war crimes. Anyway, in Krinky, it has been confirmed that not even a single strike with glide bombs over the past 24 hours has taken place after the Russians lost 3 Su-24s. It's exactly what I was talking about. This will have a behavioral effect on the Russian VKS. So the Russian Air Force are not active in striking using guided glide bombs over the Kherson Oblast and hitting the Dnipro River Delta and targets along that river. So Tendot says the destruction of the 3 Russian Su-34s yesterday brought the Russian air campaign in Kherson to a complete halt. Usually the Russian Air Forces deploy on average 80 missiles against Ukrainian positions in Kherson alone. Today it fell to exactly 0. It cannot be more obvious how brittle the Russian army really is. It is a Potemkin army which primarily lives in the masses of meat, respectively deterrence, English a bit shot there, and less from real value on the battlefield. When only one Patriot battery can cause the entire Russian Air Force to completely disappear, then you can imagine what swarms of F-16 AMRAAM AIM-120D air-to-air missiles, ATACMS and Taurus and other weapon systems against Russian air and ground assets will or could cause once they get unleashed. The Western self-deterrence is absolutely unjustified. In other words, we need to get them all this kit because, do you know what? When the kit is utilized by the Ukrainians, it is hugely effective, and there's absolutely no excuse for not providing this kit to the Ukrainians. The Russians have no real way to stand up to this kind of activity, and they are. Yeah, as I say, a huge behavioural shift, like what we have seen with the Black Sea Fleet moving from Sevastopol to Novorossiysk. Now we have the VKS not active in a way they were. And it'll be interesting to see whether the Ukrainians keep some kind of high-quality air defence in place there, or whether the deterrence is with the Russians not really knowing whether that is there or not. Also, and I did share this yesterday, it came out just after my news videos. I had to share it in my frontline update, I think, but Ilovaisk oil storage facility was hit, or I shared it in my second video. This is another example of the Ukrainians hammering the logistics. It might have been not just an oil facility. It might have been carriages on a railway at Ilovaisk. So Ilovaisk is quite a railway hub. It's been hit a number of times by the Ukrainians. There has been long cargo trains full of oil carriages that have been blown up at Ilovaisk. So that could be that again, or it could be a single oil depot. I'm not too sure. Right. Moving on, just now, as in this morning, there are explosions being reported in Tokmak in Zaporizhia and Sevastopol in Crimea. So there is Ukrainian missile activity, it appears. Okay, moving on to other bits and pieces. So the Crimea Wind, this is a pro-Ukrainian Telegram channel in Crimea that reports on things like explosions and what is going on, and the truth of some of the hits in Crimea has been cyber attacked, hit by Russian Z-Nazi hackers, as according to Tim White there. So that's a bit of a shame for pro-Ukrainian entities in Crimea. Anton Gerashchenko shares this video. Quote, "We haven't seen or held an assault rifle yet. Russian soldiers complain that they are being sent to the front without training. But that's exactly what Putin's plan is. He has a huge amount of human resources for meat assaults." Now, this is actually important evidence of something I've been talking about, which is the Russians are able to throw reserves at certain areas. It's not like they don't have reserves, but the reserves they have are either taken from other areas of the front line or are generally troops that have been newly mobilized. And so, yes, they can do a job. Give them a gun. There you go. Go and stand in those trenches. Good luck. You're going to defend against the Ukrainians. But that is often good enough. You put human beings in trenches, as long as you've got enough of them, you can stop the Ukrainians from advancing. And that appears to be what has been happening. The Russians are cycling through huge numbers of troops, and they are managing to defend and have managed to defend across the front line during the counter-offensive, generally speaking, but at huge cost to them. And here we have evidence, because some people are saying they have no reserves, but actually they are constantly mobilizing troops to the tune of tens of thousands a month. And I think have I got something on that? It might be in my next video. I've got some numbers thrown out about how many they are recruiting on a consistent basis. So here, let's go through this, and of course take it with a pinch of salt. And there's lots of swear words in this from this guy, so bear with that. But guess what? Oh man, film me, man. You know what? We've been here since the 26th, and the officers lied right to our faces, and we're territorial defence. Just now, a Lieutenant Colonel came out and said that it's the first time he'd ever heard that. Turns out we're just a small arms unit. We're effing stormtroopers. We're stormtroopers, but the territorial defence. We haven't seen assault rifles yet. We haven't held a machine gun. We haven't held a rifle in 2 weeks. We went to the range today to throw grenades. F it. They said there were no grenades. They wouldn't even bring us back on a bus. We walked from the range to get here 10 kilometers. We walked from there to here. How the F do we fight a war with officers like that? They're all lots of expletives out in Ukraine. They'll sell us out in Ukraine. And just huge amounts of swear words. So these guys aren't happy. They have not shot rifles for 2 weeks. They haven't shot a machine gun. They haven't held a rifle for 2 weeks. They were sent to the range to throw grenades as training, and then there were no grenades, and they had to walk 10 kilometers back. They weren't even driven back to the barracks. So these guys are not happy with the training, and then they're going to be sent as stormtroopers. So these guys aren't. They're told they're territorial defense, which is you're just going to be in defensive positions, behind third echelon or whatever, and then they're told, oh no, you're stormtroopers, and when you get to the front, here's your gun that you haven't had training on. Go for it. Go and attack the Ukrainians. And that seems to be what's going on. So, yeah, the Ukrainians have had a hard time in Krinky, but they are cycling through, attriting Russian forces at a fairly considerable level, if we can believe all the sources, both Ukrainian and Russian, in the area, and we look at the Ukrainian general staff figures. Things are not good for the Russians. So the Russians are making gains. The question is, at what cost? And do they have a strength in depth? If the Ukrainians could have mounted a counteroffensive, maybe in different areas, maybe with more Western weapons. If we had provided the right stuff at the right time, then the counteroffensive could have had a different effect. But you're just wondering what's going to happen after winter, next spring, the end of spring. What will the Ukrainians do? Will the Russians continue to expend all these human resources and equipment at these unsustainable levels? Will it be a case of a Pyrrhic victory? I don't know. Right. I should have shared this with you the other day. There's a big Wall Street Journal article on Prigozhin being taken out, and basically the man behind it is Patrushev, he's a former spy. He's a confidant of Putin, a big ally of Putin, and he seems to have been behind the killing of Prigozhin and his PMC, Wagner PMC entities. So in interviews with Western intelligence agencies, former US and Russian security and intelligence officials, and former Kremlin officials, the Wall Street Journal unearthed new details about the mutiny and murder of Russia's most powerful warlord and the previously unknown role of Patrushev in reasserting Putin's authority over an increasingly unstable Russia. And this basically gives you a lot of detail, this article. It's an interesting article. Obviously take it with a pinch of salt, unnamed officials, although it's not just people, these are proper officials. The words are quite formal. So if they say sources, that just means people around the officials. But when they use, this is former US and Russian security and intelligence officials. This is a higher level of anonymous source than just if they use the word source. So that is at least something, and former Kremlin officials as well. But anyway, the article is interesting. It has quite a lot of detail about how things work, about what was going on in the run-up to the Prigozhin mutiny, so on and so forth. What role Patrushev plays in all of this, and then goes on to say later Patrushev began to warn Putin and Prigozhin during the summer months of 2022, but the warnings fell on deaf ears while Wagner made progress on the battlefield. That changed when Prigozhin called Putin and complained rudely about his lack of supplies. You remember some of those videos where you're standing on a field of dead Wagner mercenaries, like all behind him in that nighttime video, and he's absolutely screaming at like Shoigu and Gerasimov for not having enough supplies. Anyway, he called Putin and complained rudely about his lack of supplies, and said the former Russian intelligence officer who maintains ties with people close to Putin and his spy chief. Prigozhin needed guns and bullets, and his men were dying in large numbers. The call happened in October with officers with others in the office, the former agent said, including Patrushev, who heard the former caterer scold the president. Later, Patrushev would use the call as a reason Putin should distance himself. The warlord had become dangerous with no respect for the Kremlin's authority. By December, it was clear Patrushev had won. Even as Prigozhin publicly railed against the military and the lack of supplies, Putin ignored him. Calls went unanswered. By early June, the Kremlin effectively announced plans to dismantle Wagner as a fighting force in Ukraine, ordering its fighters to register with Russia's defense ministry. On Friday, June the 23rd, Prigozhin launched a mutiny, taking his 25,000 men and tanks from the battlefield in Ukraine and marching toward the southern city of Rostov-on-Don to take the Russian armed forces' southern military district headquarters, which he did. The plan on what he called his March of Justice was to confront Gerasimov and Shoigu, who had been there for meetings but escaped before Prigozhin arrived. So if you remember, the actual intention of going to Rostov-on-Don was to capture Gerasimov and Shoigu, and it was a mutiny against them and not against Putin, but it kind of it morphed as he was able to take those two. But anyway, in the beginning of August, as most of Moscow went on vacation, Patrushev, in his office in central Moscow, gave orders to his assistant to proceed in shaping an operation to dispose of Prigozhin, said the former Russian intelligence officer. Putin was later shown the plans and didn't object, Western intelligence agencies said. Several weeks later, following his tour through Africa, Prigozhin was waiting at a Moscow airport while safety inspectors finished a check on the plane. It was during this delay that a small bomb was placed under the wing, said Western intelligence officials. The jet departed after 5 p.m. and reached an altitude of 28,000 feet, but after more than half an hour, the aircraft swiftly lost altitude and crashed near the village of Kushenkino. Witness videos show that after an explosion, a jet with a detached wing fell from the sky. So that's their account, and lots more detail that I hadn't given you there. Well worth reading to get an idea of what may have happened and the role Patrushev plays in the Kremlin, his influence on Putin. Right. Krinky update. Oh, this is a numbers update. This isn't a numbers update on recruited, mobilized soldiers, but this is on what's going on in Krinky. I thought I'd throw this in. So, quote, this is an update. Russian occupation forces are making every effort to neutralize the Ukrainian bridgehead on the left bank of Kherson. For this purpose, the Dnipro GV was given increased and strengthened resources. So if at the beginning of November, the Dnipro main power was about 64,000 people, then as of now, it's more than 74,000 people. Also, the Dnipro main gun has been significantly reinforced with an armoured fighting component. And if at the beginning of November there were up to 750, then now there are 950 armoured fighting vehicles. When you talk about the huge losses that the Russians are making on a daily basis, or that they're taking on a daily basis, 17 APVs, and then you understand that the claim here is that they have 950 APVs just in the Dnipro area, then you understand the task Ukraine has for attriting away the vehicles that the Russians are using. They just have massive numbers, which is due to an increased need for assault operations. On the other hand, there is a striking reduction in the artillery component. So we do understand that there's been a great reduction in artillery around the Dnipro River, around Krinky. There's complaints from the Russians that they have no counter-battery fire. So at the beginning of November, the Dnipro main gun was armed with almost 900 barrel systems, artillery systems, and now there are about 550 of them. So that is being reduced not quite to half, but that's like a 40% reduction in artillery around this area, according to this source. This is Alexander Kovalenko, so a Russian source here. Particular attention is being paid to strengthening the 70th MSD of the, I presume is that the military southern district of the 18th OVA. As part of the Dnipro main unit, it has the best equipment and is the most combat ready, along with the 104th Airborne Shock Division and the 810th Marine Brigade. That's been heavily hit. That it is most actively used in attempts to block the SOU bridgehead on the left bank. However, the use of the tactical groups numerically comparable to two brigades on the flanks and frontally on the village has not yet brought the desired result to the ROV command. It's obvious that Teplinsky, so he's a guy in charge of the VDV and this Kherson area, will blame everything on the lack of forces and means and demand that the main force be increased by a number exceeding 80,000. This is a very realistic number that the ROV command will be able to achieve thanks to the use of the resource of the civil defence of the Crimea, where in addition to the permanent grouping, 2 divisions are being formed, which will clearly go to help the greenhouse herd. I don't quite know what that means. On the other hand, the increase in the group, which is already hundreds of times larger than the group holding the bridgehead and which cannot be knocked out, is not just bad manners but a total disgrace. And what P-Star 11 goes on to say is 300 Spartans hold the bridgehead. In other words, and then he goes on actually to say this is what the New York Times failed to admit. So that kind of suicide mission article in the New York Times that so many people have had a go at is, you might be kind of true in interviewing some of the soldiers on the front line and them feeling that this is the case, but you didn't give the context of what they have achieved, which is a bridgehead that has continued to exist and attrited huge numbers of Russian soldiers, and they are fixing large numbers of troops and equipment to try and take out what is a relatively small bridgehead. So a tiny group is holding against a much larger force helped by the Su-34 until very recently. So part of the reason why the Russians have been able to have a grinding, very small success in pushing the Ukrainians back in Krinky is with the help of the Su-34s, but the Su-34s can't hammer them with guided glide bombs, then it might give the Ukrainians a bit of momentum and a bit of stickability to the area. So, just huge numbers of Russian forces there. And I just think it shows what an incredible job the Ukrainians have done, although some of those soldiers might not agree with that because things are hard. And this is, I want to play you, but I haven't got it sort of stacked up at the moment. But there was one of the reporters from the Daily Telegraph on the Ukrainian latest podcast, who's actually in this area as well, I think, recently, talking about if you and this has been the same since Vietnam, since whatever, or since, the Second World War. And if you speak to soldiers on the ground, they will tell you how horrible things are and how terrible things are and how the command isn't doing jack or whatever, because they don't know what the command is doing. They don't know what the unit next to them is particularly doing, because as a squaddy on the ground, that's not your job to know all that stuff. You're just commanded to go and do this, right? It's a command's job to know why you're doing that and how you're doing it, and the interaction between different units. And so if you are going to interview, so if you're the New York Times going to interview a bunch of soldiers who have gone across to Krinky and then come back, they're going to be like, it's horrible, it's horrific, there are people dying, there are injured people all over the shop. I don't see the sense in this. And they're going to moan about that to the reporters. But if the reporters aren't actually doing the same kind of interviews with the command structure, then they have a completely warped sense about what is actually happening and why it's happening and how it's happening. All they're doing is getting the view of someone who's been sent across the river to go and shoot some Russians and then brought back because they're injured. And they're like, yeah, life sucks. But you need the grander picture, and it will suck for some of the squaddies on the ground. Unfortunately, that is how wars work. But you speak to anyone with experience about how wars operate and the life of your general infantryman on the ground. It's a completely different story to speaking to the officers who are commanding and organising. And their experience on a day-to-day basis is going to be very different, because the officers generally aren't going to be in amongst it getting shot up and being brought back on a boat with their leg blown off. But they have the officers will have a much greater understanding of what's going on, because they're doing the ordering around, and that's just the way it works. And so a lot of the criticisms about the New York Times article is you're just speaking to the soldiers and you're not speaking enough to the people that actually know what's going on and why they're doing that. So these soldiers might feel like it's suicidal, and there's no reason for them to throw their lives away, but actually there is ultimately rationale behind what they're doing. It's just they don't know it. And you can argue that they should know it or whatever, but you need the whole context. Right, anyway, Antony Blinken here saying, we are deeply concerned about the whereabouts of Alexei Navalny. So Navalny is still missing. He's been missing for nearly 3 weeks. We once more call for his immediate release and an end to the continued repression of independent voices in Russia. Again, it goes back to any pro-Kremlin voice in my threads. Are you the good guys? Are you defending this? Are you defending this? What's happened to Navalny? And then what's happened to Navalny? And then what's happened to Navalny? Poisoned, imprisoned, disappeared. Yeah, because that's free and fair democracy. Okay, and lastly, this is a huge bit of news, and I wanted to talk about this in a live stream yesterday with James, but it slipped my mind. I had it stacked up to. So Putin apparently is ready to have start talking about ceasefire. There are these rumors that are getting out. I'm not going to go into the detail, because if Putin wants a ceasefire, he wants it because it's starting to be in his best interest to have a ceasefire. And if he has a ceasefire now, he will get the most out of it. You have all these appeasers around the world that would be like, yeah, it's a ceasefire, yeah, that's good. Right, okay, let's have negotiation because we don't want war to happen. And what will end up happening is that Ukraine will lose Crimea, Ukraine will lose loads of its land, and Russia will get the most out of it. If Russia want to go to the tables to do a deal, that's because they know they'll get the best deal out of that scenario. My advice would be, for what it's worth, don't do it. Don't negotiate. If I was Ukraine, I'd be like, we ain't negotiating jack now, because Putin thinks he's going to get the most out of it, and actually some of these appeasers will. Now, it might be unpopular, it might not go down well, but Russia are actually, although it might look different when you look at the pins on a map moving, like incrementally in Russia's favour over the last couple of weeks. But if you look at the whole scheme of things and where Russia are now and where Ukraine are now and where Ukraine are going to be given F-16s and given, if we actually gave them the weapons that they're asking for and that they need, you saw what happened with the Patriot air defense system taking out 3 Su-34s. Like, that's enough to tell you, we give them the right stuff, Ukraine will absolutely hammer Russian forces. They will take out key equipment and depots. And so Don't go for a ceasefire. Don't go to the negotiation table. You go to the negotiation table when you are in the power position. And you will be. Ukraine will be. So I think this ceasefire option, if it's true that Putin does want a ceasefire, he wants it because he knows it's the optimal time for him to ask for it. And that's not the optimal time for Ukraine. And that's really important to know. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate all your support. And remember to check out my live stream later with Jonathan Fink. Toodle pips.